Hi guys, welcome to another Monday night study. And let me say, I see everybody in the chat room. Let me make sure we're going. Okay, good. I ran across something this morning, so I wanted to kind of go back and look at something. I found something I think is going to be really interesting out of the scrolls, of course. But someone had asked a question a ways back, and in Daniel, you've got Nebuchadnezzar's image, which is made out of gold, silver, brass, or bronze, and iron. And then the toes are partially iron and partially clay. Well, since we know that those metals represent kingdom, or not kingdoms, but empires, okay, and so it's Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then that's why one place where we get the idea of a revived Roman Empire, because it's partially iron and partially clay. And so the question came up, well, if all of these others were empires, what is the clay? And I don't think anybody's ever brought that up before. I don't remember it being brought up in seminary. And so I always thought it's a revival of the Roman Empire, and clay is just like extra people from all over, a few people here and there, so nothing specific. But the question, once it was brought up, is basically the idea that if they're all empires, and then now it's Rome, or partially the old Roman Empire, combined with some other empire. Could clay be an empire in and of itself, like Babylon, Assyria, something like that? And so I vaguely remembered something along those lines. So I started looking it up in the scrolls to see what I could come up with. And I found a couple of really interesting points. So first, let me pull this up. I write books, and so we've got 34 books out, and people like those. I tried doing some videos, much like L.A. Marzulli does videos, and he tried a couple of books. And so I was going to make 4 videos, or DVDs rather, 4 DVDs on prophecy. We made the first 2 and never made the second 2. And we don't really sell them anymore because Amazon, everyone started going to online streaming like Netflix. You either rent it or buy it or subscribe for a monthly fee and have access to all their videos, that kind of thing. And so since that became kind of the norm, Amazon now has stopped doing DVDs altogether. I mean, they'll sell it if you want to make them and ship them to them, but they don't produce them anymore. So anyway, long story short, out of those 4 then, the first 2 that we made, I grabbed the PowerPoint presentations, and I'm going to bring those up for you just to kind of go through and look at the graphics, because the graphics are really good. So this is from the prophetic outline, which is, I think, the first DVD we made. But anyway, important point is, first, let's go through and look at what we're talking about. So in here is, it's called the Great Image. And this is basically Nebuchadnezzar has this dream, and I'll just kind of refresh it for all you guys that know, and maybe some of you don't. In Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of world empires. And basically, Daniel says that the head of gold is the Babylonian Empire. And after him, other kingdoms come. And some people have debated maybe it's his sons, but it's kingdoms. Later on in the book of Daniel, it says that very clearly. And he doesn't tell him much, but it ends up being Medo-Persia, which is the next one. It's the Babylonian. The reason why these are picked is because Israel is enslaved by these empires, or they have to do with Israel. So Israel becomes a nation and then basically gets captured, or God puts him in the 70-year captivity under Babylon. But Babylon goes for, as prophesied in Isaiah, for 3 generations. So there's father, son, grandson. In the days of the grandson, the kingdom falls to the Babylonians. And Isaiah even said the head of the Babylonian, or the head of the Persians rather, would be a guy named Cyrus, and details in Isaiah exactly how the kingdom is taken, which is an amazing prophecy. So anyway, so the head of gold is Babylon. The chest and arms of silver are the Medo-Persian Empire. So there's 2 arms, so Medes and Persians. And then they go for 4 or 5 generations, as mentioned in Daniel 11. And then they fall to the Greeks, and that's the belly and thighs of brass. And they eventually fall to the Romans. And in chapter 11, they're called the Kittim. The Kittim come. Kittim is an old Hebrew word for Rome. And of course, we know that the Romans were there when Jesus came the first time. So we know it's Romans. Some people try to debate that Kittim actually means Cyprus. But either way, Cyprus was an outpost of Rome. Cyprus never became an empire. Rome did. So we know it's Rome. And then you've got this feet and toes made, it says, partially of iron and partially of clay. So what's going to happen is you got the Babylonians, Medo-Persians, Greece, and then Rome. Rome splits into 2 legs or 2 pieces. And we saw that. It's the Western Rome and Eastern Rome. So Western Rome falls in 476 AD. Okay, and Western Rome is like with the Pope, Roman Catholic, Latin, the official language. The Eastern Church, though, is Byzantium, the Byzantium Empire, Greek Orthodox, language is Greek, that kind of stuff. So Rome officially falls in 476, but the Eastern Rome continues as an empire up until 1453, when it falls to the Ottoman Empire. So that's the Muslim Turks. They create an empire that lasts for, basically 500 years almost. So we have World War I to destroy the Ottoman Empire and the Germans that kind of sided together. And so at that point, the Ottoman empires broke up. There was the Balfour Declaration, the Mandate. Eventually, World War II kind of tried to do a revival of an empire. Germany thought they would create a third Reich or a third Holy Roman Empire and revive it, but it didn't take. And so at this point, then, this is what's going on. And then we get up to today. Sometime in the future, we have this. So the main question we want to ask is, what about the clay in this? Well, let's go on through. I'll just skip through here. So this is the image. And then Daniel is asking about this when we get to chapter 7. And he sees a winged lion. And the winged lion is basically Babylon. And then from there, he sees a bear. And the bear is lopsided. I picked this particular picture because you can see one leg is kind of up. He's probably just walking, but this whole concept, the bear is lopsided. He's got one paw, shoulder kind of cocked, which basically symbolizes that the Persians are stronger than the Medes. It's not like a 50-50 empire. It's a Medo-Persian empire, but it's really Persia. Okay. And so then there is a 4-headed leopard. Let's see if I can make these a little bit bigger for you to see. And let me see if I can back up. So you've got a winged lion, which is Babylon, and then a bear, Medo-Persia, a 4-headed leopard. Now, what this symbolizes, of course, is Greece, and Alexander takes over, conquers Persia, and then dies. And then the empire is so big, it actually splits into 4 pieces with 4 generals. And we'll see that again later. So that's what the 4 heads represent. Then we have it's called the Non-Descript Beast. And so in Daniel, we don't really know what it is. It's just a terrible beast, unlike the others. Well, these others are land beasts, and this is a flying beast. So anyway, but it's Rome. And we find out later in the Ezra Apocalypse that it's a 3-headed eagle in his prophecy, but it's an eagle nonetheless. So this 4th beast then is Rome. And as he's looking at this fourth beast, he comes out and looks at the head, and he sees it has 10 horns on it. And then an 11th horn pops up. Let me take this back here so you can see it easier here. So in this case, there's the head of the eagle. It's got 10 horns, which are some sort of countries that are based on the eagle. And then this little horn pops up, which is the Antichrist. Antiochus Epiphanes is a type. And he kind of takes over the empire. Well, 3 of them don't like it. So 3 of them attack the Antichrist. And I think we know which ones those are from Daniel, but those are gone, and then there are 7 left, and he is the 8th among them. And this is the end time empire that the Antichrist makes in the second half of the tribulation period. So that's what's going on. A lot of detail, but not a whole lot. So then we come to, or let's just look at this again. So you've got the head of gold, which is in Nebuchadnezzar's vision, Babylon, which is also the winged lion. You've got the chest and arms of silver, which is the bear, which is Medo-Persia. You've got the belly and thighs of brass with the 4-headed leopard, which is Greece. And then Rome comes along. And Rome takes over Israel, basically 64 BC, and goes up through Israel's destruction, and continues as a power, the main empire, all the way up to 1453 AD. It's about 500 years ago. And then we've got the Ottoman Empire, and then now. So anyway, but then we've got the feet. So this just tells us it's Rome. This tells us Rome splits into 2 pieces, which it did. Then you've got the 10 toes and the 10 horns, being this 10 kingdom or 10 nation confederacy of some sort, something connected with Rome because it's partially iron, partially clay. Okay, so then we get into chapter 8, and he has a little more specifics. He sees a ram and a goat. So the ram is actually the symbol for Persia, and the goat is actually the symbol for Greece, much like the American eagle, the bald eagle, is the symbol for United States. The lion is the symbol for Great Britain, etc. Bear is Russia. So things like that. So back then, that's what it was. So he sees this goat, this ram rather, ruling. So that would be Persia at that point. And then he sees this goat come from the east and comes in, or west rather, it comes in and attacks it. So this is the Greek Empire taking over the Persians. And this goat is a unigoat, like a unicorn. So it has one major horn in its head, and you can see that here in the picture. So what happens is, as we've said before, they take over, but then Alexander dies, and his kingdom doesn't go to like one son and hold together as a kingdom. It's fragmented into 4 kingdoms. So in this picture, when he sees this, the goat destroys the ram, and then the one horn is broken off, and in its place 4 sprout up. So basically we have this. And so let me try this again, make it a little bigger. We can see that. So in this thing, you've got this now a 4-horned goat, and the 4 pieces were Greece proper, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. Well, these 2 kind of fall out. This is just telling us what happened. These 2 fall out and kind of are ignored because they have nothing to do with Israel. These 2 do, though. When we get to chapter 11, Syria and Egypt, which is the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, both Greek, but ruling in Syria and Egypt, Israel is passed back and forth between the 2. And eventually the Antichrist comes out of he's the king of the north in the end times. So again, the 4-horned goat, let me do this so you can see it here. So the 4-horned goat and the 4-headed leopard, it's the same set of empires. So, and then we have that little horn with the perturbed face that destroys the other ones, being or rising up out of as the king of the north. So he comes out of the Syrian Empire. So Syrian, Babylonian, Assyrian, that area was the main area for at least 3 of those empires. And if it's a modern day thing, it's not old Syria, old Assyria, or old Babylon, but it's that area. So that area today comprises Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and a little bit further in other areas. So anyway, so this is what's going on, and this is what Daniel is seeing. So again, to kind of recap this, and you'll notice this. So you've got the winged lion and the head of gold, which is Babylon. You've got the bear and the ram. And incidentally, the bear in the one vision, the bear's one side is hiked up higher than the other. When he sees the ram, one of the ram's horns is higher than the other. So again, the symbolism is the same. And these correspond to the chest and arms of silver, which is Persia. And then you've got the belly and thighs of brass, which is the four-headed leopard and the uni-goat. Okay, and then so that's Greece. And then more detail is given about how it fragments into the four heads are the four horns. And then in the end times, the Antichrist comes out as the king of the north. But anyway, then this falls to the iron, which is Rome, which is the eagle, which has the 10 horns in the end time. So you got the 10 horns and the 10 toes as part of that prophecy. So, okay, and so that's all we want to see for that. So that's kind of a quick recap on that. So again, back to this question then, what about these toes? If they're partially iron, that's obviously Rome, partially clay, what does the clay represent? Or can we figure that out? So here's what I came up with today. That's just kind of an intro to the prophecies. But here's what I found out. So I went back, I vaguely remember something like this in the scrolls. So there's actually 3 scrolls we'll look at. The Apocalypse of Ezra, in the Testaments of the Patriarchs, the Testament of Noah, and then the Book of Enoch. And it's really interesting how these things come about. So here's the Apocalypse of Ezra. And it first got me thinking this is kind of a clue. So let me back up here and look at this. So in this chapter, he's talking about Israel being forsaken and what's going to happen later on. Well, it's to weed out the righteous and the good and those that love the Lord, and the Messiah will come and create an empire. And he gets a little more detail. So he's talking about all this, and he talks about the Messianic Kingdom, which is a favorite subject of a lot of prophets. So sometime in the future, the Messiah will be reigning from Israel, from Jerusalem, ruling the planet, and it will be a time of peace. It'll be great. So this Messianic Kingdom. Now, Revelation tells us it's 1,000 years. And of course, the Scroll of the Prophets told us the same thing. But so there's that, and then there's a little detail about prior to that, there is a 7-year period of judgment. After that, though, there is a new heavens and a new earth with some sort of a judgment. We would call it the new heavens, the new earth, and the great white throne judgment. So it's talking, and then it comes back and talks about these 7 years, and then it gives a point of people being saved, why some are and what some are not. And then it goes back into the 7 years. So this whole thing is a prophecy lecture, okay, by this angel to the prophet. So, but when it's talking about this looks like it's just a kind of a quick side trail on morality. But look at what it says. So this whole idea is that some people keep the commandments and some don't. Hardships come, which soften the heart of some people and harden the heart of others. It's the same basic idea. Accept the Lord or reject the Lord. Make your decision. Make it now so we can get on with things. So in the process of saying this, though, he says the whole idea that, there's not that many righteous, and it doesn't seem right that you do this. Same kind of thing prophets do a lot. So he says this, and he says, he answered me, not only that, but look at the earth. So he's going to give us an example out of the earth. Look at the earth. The earth has gold, silver, copper, iron, lead, and clay. But there's more silver than gold, more copper than silver, more iron than copper, and more lead than iron, and there's more clay than lead. Can you understand that that which is rare is precious and greatly desired? Now, he's kind of plugging this in as kind of like as a sermon. So the whole idea is like there's a lot of evil people out there. There's a lot of people that aren't really evil, but are going to do what they're going to do. So they're not going to hurt you unless you try to mess with them. There are other people that are just kind of neutral. They just don't want. And then there are people that are religious, but under times of persecution, they would fall away. And then there are people that are really, really solid. You're going to have to kill me to get me to not be a Christian and to not talk about things like that. So he's talking about it goes from the extreme common to the extreme rare. And so that's symbolic of that. So that's okay. But what caught my mind here is the symbols that he gives: gold, silver, copper, which copper, when it's added to things, is either brass or bronze, and iron. So this right here, the gold, the silver, the copper, and the iron are the four base elements or metals in Nebuchadnezzar's image. Okay, and then we know there's iron mixed with clay. There's also clay. And then in between is lead. And that got me thinking of a couple of other things. So that's just kind of a clue, but nothing specific. So I went to see if I couldn't find this kind of stuff in some of the other manuscripts. So I went over to the Patriarchs, and this is the Testament of Noah. Yeah, Testament of Noah. And he's talking about this vision that he has in this dream. Basically, the dream is that he is the king of the earth. And in the dream, he's a big cedar tree. And he spawns all these other cedar trees. So a cedar tree is just a nation, a Gentile nation. And everybody should be together and make a forest, and everything should be fine. Don't attack each other or anything. You're just, kingdoms. So then, though, in his tree, there are three branches. And one branch is, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It's pretty obvious. Out of one of these branches, eventually a Messiah comes that fixes everything. Out of one of these other branches, and that would be Shem's, Ham, the other branch, two evil people come, and that ends up being Canaan and Nimrod, which create a major problem. So this is a prophecy about basically Abraham coming along, finishing the age, destroying the Antichrist of their age and the kingdom and the false religion. And so we have all that and other things, but this is fragmented, but this is what it's talking about. And in this part of the dream, it basically says there's a forest, which is a bunch of countries. And the special plant that, Abraham begins is an olive tree or an olive vine. So you've got all the cedar trees, which are Gentile nations, and then an olive tree or an olive vine, as it's called back and forth, but an olive plant. So basically, the word is just for a plant. Big plant, little plant is tree or whatever. That's what we would call it. And there's special trees that mean special things. Generally, it's Gentiles. But in this case, you've got this forest. And at this point, you're talking about, let's just read it. He's the king, and there's a forest of all these places. The birds of the field and the cattle of the land, creeping things, are protected by them. Okay, so in other words, each government should punish wrongdoers, and that helps everybody be protected all over the planet. But that's the forest, okay? But there are stones and clay that were cutting down the forest to make a place for themselves. So this is someone who, by force, is going to try to conquer, cut down a tree, conquer, cut down another tree, make its place. So these are empires. So notice this then. There's clay and there's stones. So at first I thought that was really odd, but I think I figured it out later. We'll come back to it. Also then, there are gold, silver, brass, and iron that were cutting down the forests to make a place for themselves. So in time, there are these empires that try to destroy Gentile nations or take over. And it's gold, silver, brass, and iron, stones, and clay. Okay. Now going back to the Ezra Apocalypse, we have gold, silver, copper, or bronze or brass, iron, lead, and clay. So this is kind of a quick hint. The other one is actually a prophetic dream. Now, Noah's testament would be much older than Ezra, so Ezra may have been drawing on it. But so everything is the same. gold, silver, copper, iron, clay, but lead here, Noah says stones. And then we go to the book of Enoch, and it's kind of the same thing. Enoch is having a dream or giving a prophecy about end time stuff, and there are mountains in his, so not trees or other things, but mountains. Again, empires. To make a long story short, but he talks about them, and it says here he sees a mountain of iron, a mountain of copper, bronze, brass, bronze. There's a debate on in Daniel. King James, I think, says bronze or brass. Modern translations usually say the opposite because they say they wouldn't have had certain metals to make it. So basically, you take copper, add something else to it, and you get bronze. If you take copper and add other things to it, you get brass. So it depends on what you add to it. But the main point is that it's got copper in it. So it's a copper colored thing. So you've got gold. Well, in this case, it's iron, copper, silver, and gold. So it's going backwards, kind of looking backwards. But then it's also a mountain of soft metal and a mountain of lead. So that's pretty interesting. Soft metal. So I went back and looked up just to see what clay is made out of. And clay is made up of a bunch of stuff, but the main ingredient is aluminum phosphates, I think. Anyway, it's aluminum. So again, we have a type of, and aluminum is a soft metal. It's not that they knew how to make aluminum, but they knew how to bake clay, and clay is clay. Now, when iron is added to clay, you get the red clay that we have around here. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I was looking at this. So each one of these has the clay and the gold, the silver, the brass or copper or bronze, and iron. And then they have lead, and then they have soft metal or clay, and the lead is something like that. So what I thought about this is interesting. I went back to see, okay, so clay has got aluminum in it. Where do we get the vast majority of lead from? Let me make sure I said that right. The clay has aluminum in it. So where do we get the vast majority of lead? And so I looked it up, and there's different deposits, but in most places you get it from, it's an alloy, not an alloy, but an ore called galena. It was interesting because my wife and my two kids lived in Galena for a long time, Galena, Missouri. And Galena, Missouri was named Galena because this is the national metal of Missouri, because it's where they get lead from. And as you can see here, I thought this was interesting. As you can look at this and see, it's crystalline. It's not like a normal ore. The properties and things that are in it, you can see that it's kind of messed up, but there are, it looks like crystals, quartz crystals, but it's metal with other things in it that cause it to grow or develop like this. So instead of saying rocks, it says stones. Stones to me is like a gemstone, which would be like a quartz crystal. So instead of just normal rocks that you might get iron ore from or whatever, this is the source of lead. So I thought that was really interesting. So pulling all this together, then you've got, in Daniel, you've got gold and silver and a copper alloy, some sort of copper, and then iron. The iron fragments into two pieces, and then you've got iron mixed with clay. Now, again, does that just mean red clay, as it, instead of half iron, half something else, is what I've always thought. But clay is aluminum in dirt and other things. You add iron to it, you get red clay. So if it's iron mixed with clay, that might be what it's meaning. Either way, it's a different nation. And we've seen that through all of these. So these are empires. They are rocks or hills or something that are coming against the trees, or they are mountains, empires again. And so it's the same thing. So gold, silver, brass, or copper or whatever, iron, and then stones and clay or lead and clay. So that is really, really interesting to me. So there's one other thing before I pull this together that I just wanted to share with you. So thinking about this, if you have, let me just go back to that picture since I have it here. So you have these empires that have to do with Israel, right? And so Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then even before Rome splits into two, Israel is dissolved. Israel was dissolved in 135 or 132 to 135, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And then the split between the two empires is in 395. And then the Western division falls in 476. The Eastern division falls in 1453. Now they fall and apparently kind of sort of come back in iron like clay. But in between here, there's been a lot of other stuff, but Israel ceased to exist. So with this prophecy talking about Israel, it's logical that we would skip, a couple thousand years, and all the different kingdoms, if there are any in there, wouldn't have any bearing because Israel's not back. So Israel is back by the time we get to the feet and the toes. And of course, Israel came back about 80 years ago, 1948. So the question is, if that's the case, if this is the clay, this is the iron, in between the iron and the clay, we have lead, right? So where is this mysterious lead kingdom? So this is getting really interesting to me. And so I'm looking at this, and we know that Rome falls, okay? And then we have a Babylonian mystery religion that forms. And then the Antichrist becomes the head of 10 nations, uses the Babylonian mystery religion to come to power. And then he has his fight, with the three of them. So he's the eighth out of them now. It's this coalition. Once they get in a position of extreme or supreme power, which is in the middle of the tribulation, then they turn on the Babylonian harlot religion, destroy her, and institute their own religion. And that's where you get your false prophet and your mark of the beast and things like that. Second half of the tribulation, according to Revelation 17 and 18. So is it possible that this lead kingdom somehow is the Babylonian mystery religion? So if that's a possibility, let's look at something. And let's look at, here we go. This is my e-sword, and I am in, let me bump this up so you can see it easier. This is a prophecy about the woman in the basket. And I want you to see something. Here's lead. So let's just read this. This gets really interesting. So he has one vision, and then he gets to this other vision. The angel talked with me and said, lift up your eyes and see what is going forth, or what goes forth. And I said, what is it? And he says, it's an ephah that goes forth. Now, an ephah is like a bushel basket. It's a certain weight. So it's not like the barrels that we have, but it's a certain size that you usually put wheat, barley, corn, whatever in it, or anything actually, but it's a size, like a gallon or a barrel, so many quarts or whatever. So it's a group. Okay, so there's an ephah. So this, you would think it's got food in it, something. Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. Now that's a clue. Now there was lifted up, and behold, there was lifted on it a talent of lead. So a talent is, I think, 100 pounds, but you've got basically lead that forms this lid, and it's really heavy, okay? So you put the evil woman whose wickedness in the basket, put the lid on it, and there's no way that she could open it up. She's trapped in there. That's the symbolism. So it's an ephah with a lead top, wickedness inside. So behold, there was a It was lifted up, a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sits in the midst of the ephah. So there's a woman, and it says that her name is wickedness. Now, wickedness can mean just wickedness in general, but it usually refers to a harlot or a prostitute. And then in this kind of language, we're talking about it being a false religion, because the symbolism is that Israel, or the church, the bride of Christ, or Israel, the wife of Jehovah, that kind of thing, is cheating on him. So she's a harlot, she's a prostitute. She's not being loyal to her husband, she's going after strange gods. So that kind of a thing. So if I claim to be a Christian, but I mess around in the occult or Buddhism, I'm basically being unfaithful. And this is a whole religion based on looking like it's godly when it's playing around with the occult and other things. So there's this woman called wickedness, which is a religion of some sort. She's put in an ephah basket, and there's a talent of lead that seals her in it. So she is a lead kingdom, so to speak. And he cast it in the midst of the ephah, and cast her rather in the midst of the ephah, and then put the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof, or on the top. So it's sealing her in. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women. And this is a bit of controversy. I think I know who the two women are. But anyway, there came out two women, and wind was in their wings, and they had wings like a stork. Now, a stork is an unclean bird, but these are basically daughters of the Babylonian harlot system, or something like that, or two supporters. And if this is an end time prophecy, which I think it is, we can probably identify those. I think the book of Gad identifies them pretty easy. Anyway, so the wickedness, the heart of this evil system, is sealed in the basket, the ephah, with lead. These two women come up, they have stork wings, and they lift up the ephah between the heaven and the earth, so that it doesn't go to heaven, it just flies like where the birds fly. It's picked up and shot somewhere, and it goes somewhere. And it says, then I said to the angel who was talking with me, where are they bearing this ephah? So where's the ephah going? And it said unto me, to build it a house. Now the word for house here in Hebrew can mean house. It can also mean a temple. If it's a person living in a building, it's a house. If it's a deity or an institution living in a building, it's a religion, therefore it's a temple. So you could translate this to build it a house, it, meaning wickedness, a house or a temple in the land of Shinar. Shinar is Babylon. So this is a wicked system, which is a religious system, harlotry religious system, made with lead, that is in Babylon or Shinar, and it has a house there. It's housed there, or that's where its headquarters is. Okay, and it shall be established. So this religion becomes established starting in Babylon and then spreading out, and set upon her own base. So this is interesting. So this religion comes forth out of Iraq in some sense. Now, it's not necessarily Islam, because we're talking about, we're not sure what time period we're in or anything else. But I just wanted you to look at this. So here we have, obviously, if you were to name this, it's a Babylonian mystery religion. Okay, it's a wicked system, a false religious system having to do with Babylon or Shinar, and it's connected with lead. So just wanted to kind of share that with you, because these are really interesting. So again, we have gold, silver, brass, iron, and let me get to the other one so it would look better here. Mountains. Okay, here we go. So gold, silver, copper, iron, lead, and clay. So this is interesting to me. So it might be, and this is just a clue, but this is enough data to probably form some opinions. We keep getting clues that don't quite explain everything, because we're supposed to already know this stuff, but we're getting more of it. So there's a gold, a silver, a copper, an iron kingdom. There's a lead kingdom, and there's a clay kingdom. And the clay is either mixed with iron and clay, or it's simply red clay, because that would be clay mixed with iron. So this could be the Babylonian mystery religion in this time period might be Islam, of which would be the Babylonian system or the Iraqi system, headquartered in Saudi Arabia. But it also has these two stork ladies with it. And so I think that's described in that. So we've got that going on. So if this is correct, you've got iron or Rome fizzling out, and a long time goes by because Israel's not there. Israel comes back, picks up where it left off, and we have this Babylonian mystery religion system, government thing, apostasy. And this system exists for a while. The Antichrist is vaulted into power, becomes the king of these 10 nations, the ironish clay or the red clay, and it destroys the lead kingdom or the Babylonian kingdom and becomes supreme until the time that in the vision, you see the, let me go back to the beginning here. So you have this vision, and as he's watching this thing, this large stone without hands comes from the heavens. It's the Messiah's kingdom, hits the image at the feet and destroys the entire thing, completely obliterates it. So I haven't given you a whole lot of for sure answers, but I think this is really interesting, another clue to kind of start studying with. So I just wanted to give that to you. So we'll go ahead and stop there for tonight. But we're getting more and more clues, and I think they're coming together nicely. So if the book of Gad is going to explain to us who the two stork ladies are and what era it's in, then we can begin to define the Babylonian mystery religion and see if it's here now in full force, not quite, or fizzling out, or whatever. And then this would be about the time the Antichrist would come around. So very, very interesting stuff. So let me stop here for tonight then. And so God bless, and we'll see you guys later.